All right, let me say good afternoon, a special greetings and welcome to those of you already locked in the listening and viewing audience with us here this afternoon, right here on the social media platform of Civic Vibes. That is, it's always my pleasure to welcome you here each and every Sunday from the 4 o'clock hour. It's already 5 minutes past that good old hour of 4 o'clock. And so, yes, we're just making the crowd, as it will, build up just a bit, and we are all set, we are well oiled, and we are ready to go this afternoon, being the 5th day of June 2022. Again, it's my pleasure to welcome you here, right here on the social media platform of Civic Vibes. That is the social media platform where you get that sort of engagement every Sunday. Every Sunday, you get that kind of engagement from us in terms of a civic-minded education. So whatever it is happening in your community, we will bring it in terms of the kind of message that you guys want to hear out there and want to apply, as it were, especially in your community life, so that your country, whatever country it is, your country can be made better because of the application, as it were, that you are applying, the lessons that you're applying from the desk of Civic Vibes. This afternoon, let me say straight up, my apology for Paula Celestin, the co-host of the program. She will not be here with us this afternoon in the flesh. She is engaging herself in other priority business at this time. And so, Paula, I know you're tuned in, you're listening. Good afternoon to you, and wish you all the very best this afternoon in your endeavor. Let me as well, before I move across to the guest that is already here in the studio, on the feed that is, let me say a special good afternoon to all of you locked onto the live at this time. I'm seeing a number of folks here already, at least. The number is growing up nicely. 38 of you guys are here. And so we want to say a special good evening, a special good afternoon, whatever it is, in whatever time it is that is in your neck of the wood. We have persons like Aura Burton here, Gertrude Deschamps. Good afternoon to you. Madeline Moses, Charlene Warren, Clara Lynn, sorry, Charlene, Clara Lynn Warrington, good afternoon to you. We have Cheryl Bernadette Garraway, good afternoon to you folks. Olivier Esprit, you're there. Maxime Seraphine, you're there. Marvella Defoe, you know, and a lot of you guys. My brother Pat Corbett down in the north. Good afternoon to you. Andrina Franklin, good afternoon. Eliza Luis, Magdalene Seaman. We have brother Dave Bertrand, that is a usual suspect each and every Sunday, right here first. Janice Jajak, good afternoon to you. Janice Shaplis, I call her another usual suspect. So all of you folks, what I need you guys to do now is don't be too greedy with the information. Please share the live as we move on so that others can get that notification from you and that they too can be part and parcel of the information that we're about to dispense here this afternoon. So again, it's my pleasure to welcome you here. Please share the live at this time. Let this conversation this afternoon go viral from the Civic Vibes social media platform. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, young people in the listening and viewing audience, let me move across to my first guest here this afternoon. His name is Mr. Ruggles Ferguson out of Grenada, a very formidable legal mind emanating out of Grenada at this time. And he's going to have a very interesting conversation with us here this afternoon, all pertaining to rights of individual. Yes, you heard me right. Mr. Ferguson, a man that is known in the legal fraternity in Grenada, that is the Spice Isle of the Caribbean, that is. He's going to speak with us this afternoon on just a bit of your rights as an individual, especially where the law is concerned. So we look forward to him and him having that very all engaging discussion with us here this afternoon. On the second segment, the second leg, as it were, of the program. And so Mr. Ferguson time will be from just about, we'll end the discussion with him around 5 o'clock this afternoon. So we got to get into it. The second leg of the conversation will be with our brother Paul Barron out of the Kalinago territory this afternoon. We heard Paul Barron first, and yes, you asked for him to come back to the desk of Civic Vibes. And so, yes, we obeyed. And he is here this afternoon from around after 5. We will be talking to brother Paul Barron. And the discussion that we'll be focusing with brother Paul Barron is all around the youth entrepreneurship and how they can access much needed finance. All right, so people, a very interesting and a very engaging conversation in just a bit is going to start to take place here And so I want to say now a special good afternoon to Mr. Ruggles Ferguson. Good afternoon to you, my brother. How are you?
Yes, good afternoon, and good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to all your listeners and viewers. Pleasant good afternoon. Yes.
Brother Ruggles, it's always a pleasure having you. I know that you're a busy man, but you always make time for such conversations. So again, on behalf of the many listeners and viewers, I want to thank you very much for coming on this afternoon.
Yes, well, you're most welcome. It's all in the interest of public legal education, which we do at the level of the bar associations. We try to encourage bar associations and attorneys to do as much public, legal education as possible on important areas that impact the lives of the public on a daily or regular basis.
Yes, indeed. So in a nutshell, I can say you guys are engaged in a lot of pro bono work, as it were, in your neck of the wood.
Yes, well, it's all part of the giving. It's pro bono. The Grenada Bar Association has been noted for its public education initiatives, radio programs, and other programs to keep the public abreast on their rights and procedures, so the law does not remain a mystery to people. Yeah, so I suppose this afternoon, the topic chosen by yourself, a very interesting topic indeed, that I did in another country a few weeks ago, but it's on the issue of arrest. So I go first or you go first?
Well, before we go into the meat, Brother Ferguson, of the discussion this afternoon, we heard about a couple of weeks ago that you guys' parliament in the Spice Isle was dissolved. How is that going over there, politically speaking? How are you guys, going through the process, as it were, of campaigning?
Yes, well, Parliament, yes, Parliament was dissolved, and the in fact nomination day was on Wednesday. Gone was nomination day, and the election day is on the 23rd of June. So parties and independent candidates are in full flight with the campaign now. In fact, there are massive meetings of the major parties this evening in different parishes. So it has been going. Our elections are not usually, thankfully, so marked by violence and the usual robust submissions by both sides and the usual picong, but unlike certain countries, Grenada is not known to have elections that turn out violence, and let's hope that it keeps that way.
Yes, let's hope so as well, in the interest of you guys in Grenada. Thank you very much for bringing us up to date, as it were, in terms of the political happenings in your neck of the wood. As we get into the discussion this afternoon, Brother Ferguson, let me ask you straight off the bat, in terms of the rights of individuals, especially when they are being investigated by the law or whatever it is, in terms of their rights. Why are persons' rights so important, especially, as the topic says this afternoon, when persons are arrested? Just why?
Yes. All right. Well, probably I should start off giving some context, as you have started off on the issue of rights.
Sure.
The most countries in the Commonwealth have similar constitutions. Dominica, Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, the English-speaking Caribbean, and even beyond, because of our history of being colonized by the United Kingdom, and when our respective countries gained independence, there were similar constitutions. There may be variations here and there, but in the Constitution, and the Constitution sets out the basic structure of the state, makes provision for a legislature to pass laws, an executive or cabinet to deal with issues of policy, and you have a judiciary that is responsible for ensuring that the laws are interpreted properly and to make decisions when there are a legal dispute. But among the provisions of that constitution, apart from, making provisions for the different structures of the state, the different roles that particular parties will play, whether it's the supervisor of elections, the director of public prosecutions, the attorney general, you have what you call fundamental rights and freedoms. Fundamental rights and freedoms. And of course, among those fundamental rights and freedoms starts off with the right to life. There's a right to personal liberty, protection from slavery and forced labor, protection from cruel and inhuman punishment. Those that people are most familiar with would be freedom of expression.
Yes.
And probably if you ask, take a poll and you ask what are the fundamental rights under the Constitution, you'll hear probably the first answer will be freedom of expression, and there might be a long pause after that, right? But you have freedom of movement, you have protection from discrimination, you have freedom of assembly and association. So all these are fundamental rights and freedoms. And the Constitution itself sets up the structure of Parliament to pass laws. But one of the features of the Constitution is, and our kind of Constitution, is that the Constitution is the supreme law. So even if Parliament can pass certain laws, and they are at liberty to pass any law, but those laws must not infringe the Constitution, and more particularly infringe fundamental rights and freedoms. So when we're speaking about rights and rights to arrest, it comes against the background of the fundamental right to personal liberty. But as the Constitution itself says, that no right is absolute. So if you have, yes, there are fundamental rights and freedoms, but there might be laws passed that restrict those rights in the interest, and the Constitution lays out a number of things, including public order, defense, public morality, public health, and these features that in a limited way, you can restrict those rights. So in relation to the right to personal liberty, then that right can be restricted by the arrest of an individual, because the law provides and empowers the police, for example, to carry out arrest pursuant to investigation of crimes, and ultimately somebody has to be arrested and charged. That is permissible. However, there's always the tension between the fundamental right and freedom, which is the right to personal liberty here, and of course, an abuse of that right. So for example, when you are dealing with issues that touch and concern fundamental rights in particular, you have to ensure that that balance is struck. So for example, you have different countries with different time periods that the police can detain you without charge, for example, in some jurisdictions. In most of them, you have 48 hours. If within a 48-hour period, then you are not charged, then you are released.
In Dominica's case, it is 72.
Right, 72 hours, and there are one or two cases where you have even 24 hours. But generally, the average is a 48-hour period. But yeah, so that within that period, the investigation can take place. And if you are arrested and charged, then, okay, the police have the authority, if they have sufficient evidence to proffer a charge against you, then you may be charged. If you're not charged, then you are released. So the power of arrest. So the Constitution provides for the fundamental right of personal liberty, and then you have laws such as the Police Act. And that act, which is an act of parliament, it gives particular power to the police. But when you are given such powers, you have to be mindful of the constitutional rights that exist and ensure that in given powers, those rights are not necessarily or arbitrarily taken away. So the rights now of a person upon being arrested, and so the purpose of an arrest, for example, when somebody is arrested, first and foremost, as we said, that person's liberty is being curtailed during that period of arrest because they're not free to go. Yeah. However, when you are arrested, then the next issue that arises would be the question of bail. So let us say that you are arrested for a particular offense, and the issue then, should that person be released on bail pending the hearing and determination of the matter, or should that person be remanded, as the term is used, in custody pending the hearing and determination of the matter? Now, there are several things that would inform as to what to do. Because you may have instances, for example, where after the arrest and the charge, the prosecution is not objecting to bail. So then it's left at that stage for the magistrate, usually, to set bail. I'd say, well, $10,000, one surety, $20,000, two sureties, $50,000, $100,000. It depends on the offense. Yeah. And therefore, once that the bail conditions are imposed, then it's a question for the accused to then seek persons to, as the saying goes, stand his bail, his or her bail. If, however, the police are refusing, and when I say police here, I use it interchangeably with prosecution because they are the ones who lay the charge and may be objecting to bail. That's not the end of the story. It doesn't mean, well, they're objecting and therefore you can't get bail, because there are two sides to every matter. There's the prosecution that lays the charge, and there's the accused or defense. And therefore, if the prosecution is objecting to bail, that person who is arrested and possibly in the station, and there's an objection to bail, that person has to be brought to the court as soon as possible after being charged, once bail is being objected to, for an application for bail to be made before the magistrate, and the magistrate will hear both sides and will grant or refuse bail. Now, what are some of the conditions that will be taken into consideration when bail is being considered? Now, the first thing I should say is that there is always a presumption in favor of bail. There's also always a presumption in favor of bail.
Okay.
And that goes hand in hand with another presumption, which is the presumption of innocence. So a charge is not a conviction. A charge merely triggers the process. A court ultimately will determine whether that person is guilty or not guilty. So until that is done, then the person is presumed to be innocent. And that is why there is a presumption in favor of bail, because you're not convicted yet. You are merely charged. So what are the conditions, some of the common conditions that a court would consider in deciding whether or not to grant bail? And one of the important considerations is whether the person is a flight risk. What you do when you are considering bail is to ensure that the person turns up on the days and dates set for his or her trial. And if, based on what is presented to the court, that person is likely not to turn up, because that person is a flight risk. And that is why many times you have like people from outside being charged for offenses, especially drugs. So you might have somebody coming out from a neighboring island. Now in those circumstances, especially if they came in on a boat, then there's a reluctance to grant bail because that person is seen as a flight risk. That person may not have any family or support structure in the particular country. So such a person, more likely than not, will be remanded unless that person can show that, listen, if I get bail, I can stay by X, and I give an undertaking, I would appear in court on the days and dates set for trial. If they, so that's one factor.
Yeah.
Second factor that the court considers is whether or not that person will interfere with witnesses while on bail and prior to trial. So, at times you might have people issuing threats to witnesses. That goes against you in a bail hearing, because what the court does not want is for you to threaten witnesses, intimidate them in any way, and sometimes it's the virtual complainant himself or herself. And the court therefore takes that into consideration, whether or not to grant bail. Then you may have a situation where a person has pending matters before the court and are already on bail for pending matters. You might have 2 or 3 other matters before the court. Mm-hmm. And the court in those circumstances may be more reluctant to grant bail. Because whether or not you may go out and commit other offenses. So for example, Christmas time is one of those times when you might have an increase in break-ins, and somebody has a long record of breaking and entry and stealing, and so that can possibly go against you in getting bail. But the bottom line is to the consideration of bail. The critical question is whether you will turn up on the day of your hearing, whether you will interfere with witnesses once you get bail and you are outside. Yeah. Right? But there's a presumption, because that presumption of innocence is again granted by the Constitution, the supreme law, which says, listen, unless a court finds you guilty or you plead guilty, then you are presumed to be innocent.
Innocent, yes.
Yes, because actually, apart from the fundamental right to personal liberty, there is also another fundamental right contained in the Constitution, and that is the right to a fair trial. And it's, in different sections in the different constitutions. In Grenada is Section 8, But what it says, if a person is charged with a criminal offense, then that person has the right to be tried within a reasonable time by a competent court established by law. So not trial by rum shop, not trial by radio, not trial by the block. That might be a different kind of trial.
Yes.
But once it's a criminal trial, then you have the a court determining it, right? And that's why, again, you hear of that principle of the separation of powers. As I started off, and I said the parliament responsible for passing laws, the executive or cabinet responsible for policy making, and the judiciary responsible for interpreting the law. In other words, what the judiciary says is the law or is the meaning of the law passed by parliament, then that is the meaning of the law. You don't go back and ask the parliamentarians, well, what they mean when they passed it. Once it's passed and it's a law, then the court interprets that law.
True.
So, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ferguson, Mr. Ferguson, for basically laying down, as it were, the foundation or the cornerstone as it relates to persons' rights when suspecting of being running afoul of the law. That we appreciate very much from you in terms of your opening salvo, as it were. What I want to do here with you now, Mr. Ferguson, is to sort of walk it back a bit and get persons to understand their rights, as it were, when they are arrested. Just walk it back, because a lot of persons sometimes when they're arrested, you know, the fear that kicks in, the panic, and you will find some policemen or whoever is doing the arresting might infringe upon their basic rights, as it were, that is protected by the Constitution. So if, for example, I'm just asking now, if, for example, these rights, one or two of these rights, are infringed upon by the arresting officer, is there any recourse for the person that is being investigated?
Yes. Okay. A good question. And the starting point, however, is not arrest. I think we should take it from the top, from the very first step. Because remember, we're dealing these, once you hear the concept arrest, then it's associated with a criminal matter.
Okay.
So you know there are civil matters, so matters related to property or family, as the case may be, and there are criminal matters, right? And arrest is associated with criminal matters. So it starts even before arrest, and probably the rights are crucial before arrest, right? Before arrest, because what happens is that it all starts off with a complaint. Somebody makes a complaint, one, of accusing somebody of doing something. So you have, for example, sexual offenses, or that somebody caused harm to somebody. And so a complaint is made to the police.
Yes.
Right? And then the police now, first step, they embark on an investigation. So they may take a statement from the person that is complaining, and the person makes these allegations. And normally you have allegations made against an individual. So first, even before arrest, then you have the person may be detained for questioning, right? For questioning. Because you want to hear what his or her story is.
Okay, so let me just interject right there. Just stick a pin right there. Somebody makes a case or an allegation or complaint, as you say, against another individual. The police takes that report and the police starts the investigation. The question to you right there and then is, upon the commencement of that investigation by the police, what sort of quote unquote criteria must be met before the police, or whilst the police is carrying out their investigation and would want to deal or would want to detain that person for that, whatever the allegation is?
Well, it has to be sufficient evidence that shows an offense or potential offense has been committed.
Okay, good.
Right? So the question is, so for example, if you're walking down the road and X is coming up the road and X vexed because he didn't tell X good morning, right? And you're so rude and unpleasant, then that's not an offense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you run to the police and tell them that, well, hey, that's not an offense. That doesn't warrant an investigation. That might be bad manners. However, right, a complaint, in order to trigger an investigation, must be about a potential offense being committed, right? And therefore, there may be witnesses, so that depending on what the nature of the matter is, it might be some physical altercation which led to the personal injury of somebody, and the injured person makes a complaint, and he says, well, listen, I was by the shop, and there are these 4 people who were by the shop too when the incident occurred. This man just come, I didn't do him anything, and he pulled out a knife, and he started to choke me up. Or it was in the course of attempted robbery or whatever, but it's a complaint.
Yes, yes.
Right? And therefore, that person, especially if injured and reports to the police would give them a form to go to the doctor. And the doctor would then determine the extent of the injury. There's a form where you normally tick off if it's a wound, if it's causing harm, causing grievous harm. So for example, let's say a limb comes out, that's called maiming, right? An arm, an ear, a foot, right? That's called maiming, or it might be attempted murder. But there is the complaint that triggers the process.
Okay, cool.
No, so let's say there's a suspect. The person says A did it. And therefore, in the course of the investigation, the police would want to speak with A.
Okay.
Right. And that's where now the issue of rights first enters the picture.
Now, does A have any rights there when that investigation is triggered?
Precisely. So the police will ask questions because it's in the course of an investigation. Part of an investigation would be inquiries. And you are asking questions. And it is at that point, well, first and foremost, the police are supposed to advise you of your rights. In the police station itself, there should be notices on the walls advising of rights. And when the police are about to question you, they ought to, what is called, caution you. And you know, the regular caution is that, you know, I'm about to conduct an interview. You are not obliged to say anything, but anything you say may be used in evidence. Now, that's where sometimes it doesn't happen at all. What I'm saying that is what's supposed to happen.
All right. Now, just a question right there as we're on that point. In preparation for the program this afternoon, I read up about the Miranda rights. If you look in the US and other countries where persons are being investigated for whatever crime it is, or whatever it is, the situation, these rights are normally read to them each and every time. We see it in the movies, we see it on TV, we see it in real life court sessions happening. In Dominica and in the region, and I'm glad you pointed it out, that is what is supposed to be happening. But I must lament the fact, Mr. Ferguson, that is not always the case. Sometimes an investigation is started by the police, and the police, they don't go down that route in terms of, reading the person or reading to the person these rights. So question there to you. If the police does that, or in that case, doesn't do that, is that an infringement on that person's right that has been investigated?
Right. Now, what can happen? What can happen, especially if that person makes a confession? Right, a confession, and that's why it is so important to ensure that procedures are followed and a proper investigation is undertaken, even beyond getting a confession. So, for example, there are instances, and in most serious crimes like murder, where the only evidence that links the accused to the crime is a confession statement. And that confession statement is challenged in a court, and then the court, now every statement, even if it's a confession statement, it must be given voluntarily.
Okay.
So if it is obtained by force, then the court has the discretion to exclude that statement. And if it's the only evidence, and that's why forensic evidence is so important too, because if the confession statement goes, then the case falls. So that's why it is so important that police officers be professional in interviewing accused persons, especially when it relates to extracting incriminating evidence or confessions. Because when that person then later on realizes what their rights are, and it gets into the hands of a lawyer, and it gets to court, and it gets challenged, then there goes your major piece of evidence, right? So it can have that drastic effect. Not in all instances. It depends, of course, on the peculiar facts of each case. Okay. But we are on the point of the interview, right? Of the interview.
Yes.
So in terms of rights, so an accused person has the right to ask for counsel, the right to a phone call to reach counsel, and to have counsel advise independently, or for counsel to be present during an interview. It doesn't happen in these times, but once upon a time, once you're arrested by the police and you're in the hands of the police, then they will do what they have to do to extract whatever statement from you that suits the purpose of the investigation, and it might extend to the torture of an individual. That has been known to happen over centuries. Thankfully, I believe it happens less now, because people are more conscious of their rights, one, and then these issues relate to human rights, and human rights issues take a more predominant role in the courts in these modern times. So just go in and beat somebody, and then the person may have to be even hospitalized as a result of being beaten at the hands of the police. You have heard instances. There was one in Trinidad recently that has triggered an investigation in relation to a kidnapping murder, and 2 of the accused persons died in police custody. So you have these extremes. So step 1 is that you should be advised of your rights before a statement is taken from you or an interview conducted. You ought to be cautioned in the appropriate language, which includes that you have the right to remain silent, and that right still exists in most of the countries. And then you have the right to exercise certain options. It's advisable you give your name and address, but you can remain silent. You can answer all questions, or you can answer some questions and not answer others.
Okay.
Right? Because that's your right. The police, of course, they have the right to ask questions. And you may see some interview sheets with question, and no answer, no answer, no answer. Right? So they ask the question nevertheless, and the person exercises his her choice to remain silent. But it's a right. That's where some of the initial rights arise, even before arrest, because an arrest comes in those circumstances that I've explained. After an investigation is conducted and the police believe, or the prosecution believes, the police may send it to the DPP, for example, for advice, that they have sufficient evidence to lay a charge against you for a particular offense. So yes, that one originates out of a complaint situation, and that aspect of it sees an accused being questioned in the station and what rights that accused has while in the station and prior to arrest. So yes, in fact, when we started off with arrest, that's not, you don't just get arrested. So
there's a process before the arrest.
There is a procedure before arrest, and probably the critical procedure where you need to be advised is even before that arrest takes place.
True. Just before Mr. Ferguson, we get to the live feed to take some comments there. I want you to just reiterate the point that you made a while ago. Whilst going through that investigation, as it were, with a police officer, someone can choose, that is their right, not to answer a question or questions. I just need you to expound on that before we go to take some comments.
Yes, that's fast. You can answer certain questions. You can answer all questions, or you can answer no question. Right? You decline as part of your right to answer any questions. Now, some people, and I even had the occasion to make that point recently, just about 2-3 days ago. Some people may take the view that, listen, being silent is the correct thing all the time. It's not necessarily, it depends on the circumstances of each case, really. But what is important is that you understand that you have that right too. It's True. Part of your tray of options.
Yes.
When you are exercising options. Right? So that was the part. That was the part dealing with a complaint. Somebody walks into the police station, makes a complaint. But you may have a situation now where there is an arrest because an offense is taking place before the very eyes of the police.
Okay.
So this is not a situation where somebody goes and makes a complaint to the police, but you have a situation where a fight breaks out between individuals, or one individual attacks another individual. Either the police, they are called in, or the police are present and actually witness it. And in those circumstances, can arrest an individual because the offense is taken place before his or her very eyes. In fact, probably the main witness in that case, not some civilian complainant, but would be the police and probably the injured person. But the police there is an eyewitness. And therefore, you can have an arrest in those particular circumstances.
Yes, indeed. Someone is sending me a private message on my phone to ask you there. They said that they're listening in on the conversation and they want to thank you very much for basically bringing us up to speed as it pertains to person's rights when arrest, as the person said, is made. But you explained the situation before, even before an arrest. The question that this person is asking, can you ask your guest for me, please? Does a lawyer have to be present when an investigation is being carried out in terms of the question and answer?
No, it's not necessary. Again, it depends on so many different variables.
Yeah.
The straight answer is no, it is not necessary. But somebody, again, it depends on the individual, it depends on the issue, because some people may prefer to have a lawyer present, and you have a right. Now, during the course of an investigation, one of the issues might be whether the lawyer is immediately available. However, you have a right to consult with an attorney. So what the attorney might do then, if called, is to indicate what your rights are in the circumstances. And if the attorney speaks to you and is able to get the essence of what the matter is, then to advise to what should be done in those circumstances. Because as I say, it's not necessarily always the case, though some would argue it might be the safest thing to do if you're not sure. But sometimes giving a statement early up can exonerate you. It might be the very thing that exonerates you later. So every case turns on its own peculiar facts and circumstances.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. We understand that very, very. There's another question coming in here privately that asked me to ask you, what about harassment when police officers, the person is saying, harass certain citizens because it is perceived that these citizens are not, quote unquote, supporting the status quo? Where does the rights and the harassment, where do they not mesh, as it were?
Well, again, here, it depends on what the nature of the harassment is. So, for example, you may have some people complaining that the police always arresting me.
Right. The person specifically said willy-nilly arrest of persons without, justification.
Right. So now in law, remember, their rights. And that's why even topics like these can't be discussed in isolation from things like the Constitution, for example. Too many times, discussions as these take place without an understanding of the backdrop, which is the Constitution and your fundamental rights. But if, for example, somebody is charged for an offense, and really and truly there was no basis for laying that charge, and the court ultimately acquits that person, then that person can sue for what is called malicious prosecution. There are a number of cases, in the region and outside the region, where if it is clear on the face of it that there was no basis for bringing the charge, and the charge was brought maliciously, either by the person making the complaint or it could be the police. And in those circumstances, you sue now in the civil court for malicious prosecution. And I've been, in fact, involved in 1 or 2 malicious prosecution cases, and the awards were fairly significant. And I know of some other awards in other countries. So you have that right. That's why it's called malicious prosecution.
Yeah.
Right? It's motivated by something else outside of the complaint made.
True.
Right.
Yes, so Mr. Ferguson, it's 5 minutes to our time, our end time that is. Unfortunately, we have to bring it to a wrap in 5 minutes time. How time flies, huh? Okay. But what I want you to do now with your 5 minutes, if you will, is to sort of just tie the conversation in, drive home some points, impress the listeners, impress the viewers in terms of why are rights, or why is an individual right so crucial when dealing with the law. Finally.
But I mean, it's important because citizens have rights, of course, and it's important that those rights be respected. Now, there'll always be a tension, and lots of times the police are criticized. The police themselves have a tough job to do because, and so it's always about balancing, right? You're balancing rights. There may be individuals that give the police a hard time, or we might just be unreasonable or irrational. And that's where training comes in. You don't want every Monday morning the police to be breaking out in a fight with a civilian. Had the situation been managed in a particular way, or the police officer trained, then what you find is that the whole violence aspect of it, force aspect of it can be minimized. And it's a point that's important to make too, especially when arrests are being executed in the face of an offense being committed. Now, a citizen has the right to resist an unlawful arrest. However, the question of what is the nature of that resistance, whether it should be a fight with the police, because if it turns out to have been a lawful arrest and the court determines it was a lawful arrest, the citizen can find himself or herself being slapped with, there's a suite of charges. Resisting arrest, obstruction of police, assault on police,
yes,
obscene language, threatening language. So you find now in the process, you get 6 charges slapped on you. No, you can protest, but at times it is better to register your protest, by saying that I do not consent to this happening, and I'm going with you under protest. That might be better than breaking out in a fight and ending up being charged for several other charges with which you may or may not be found guilty. Because usually the underlying issue for the court there is whether or not it was a lawful arrest in the first case, and someone may be acquitted, but you stand the risk of being convicted and a number of convictions being associated, with your name. Yeah. But it's important to understand and let me just recap it, because criminal matters start with a complaint. Somebody makes a complaint, or it may be an offense being committed in the eyes of the police. Then if it's a complaint, there's an investigation. And part of the investigation, the accused might be questioned. When the accused is brought in for questioning, the accused has the right to remain silent, to answer all questions, answer some questions, don't answer some. If that person is charged with an offense, the next issue that arises is bail. If the police are not objecting to bail, then that the bail conditions are set and that person is released. If the police are objecting to bail, then the accused has to be brought to court as soon as possible, reasonably practicable. So an application for bail may be made before the court. And if that bail application is successful, then bail conditions are set. If not successful, the person is remanded.
True. And
then the trial takes place, and ultimately a court determines whether the person is guilty or not guilty. If there are two broad kinds of offenses, criminal offenses, you have summary offenses, and those can be heard and determined in the magistrate's court. In other words, the magistrate can hear the evidence and determine whether you are guilty or not guilty. If it's an indictable offense or the most serious offenses, what takes place before the magistrate's court is not a trial, but a preliminary inquiry. And at the end of the preliminary inquiry, with the same witnesses going in the box and giving evidence, the magistrate determines whether there is sufficient evidence to send the matter before the High Court for trial before judge and jury. Put another way, the magistrate determines whether a prima facie case is made out. And then it goes up for trial before judge and jury. But I suppose in an hour it's difficult to go through these things in detail. But so in essence, that is the process.
So which means then you have to commit yourselves to coming back here sometime, Mr. Ferguson, to further the points that you studied there this afternoon. Is that so?
Well, that's up to you. That's up to you. I'll make myself available once convenient.
Yes.
As I said, it's all public education. I believe public education is important because many times just people don't know their rights.
True.
And if those who know their rights don't explain it to them, then they would remain not knowing their rights, because law can tend to be very technical, written in technical language. These words, and you don't know, so people don't go and pick up a law book and just read it like that.
That is why you guys are there. You're attorneys at law.
Yeah, well, and as I say, beyond the normal just representing people in a courthouse, there's a broader duty to educate the public, right, and let them know, just as I believe doctors have a duty, to educate the public on things, medical. Just so I believe lawyers have a duty to educate the public on things legal.
All right, Mr. Ferguson, I want to thank you very much. I want to thank you in a very profuse way here this afternoon, all our listeners, all our viewers here. Time well spent, an hour come and gone. And at least I for sure learned something this afternoon. And I hope that some of our viewers and listeners learned something as well. So on their behalf, I want to say thank you very much. And let us leave that line of communication open, sir, so that, as you said a while ago, maybe some other time I can invite you here on the Civic Vibes program. Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Ruggles.
thank you. Thank you for having me, and good evening.
Good afternoon to you. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Yes.
All right. To you and the people in Grenada.
Sure.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye. All right, Dominicans, those of you here on the Nature Isle, a pleasant good afternoon to you again. We just ended, as it were, a discussion with attorney at law out of Grenada, that is Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, basically gave a good account of himself here. And so on behalf of you guys out there, we want to thank him. We are going to go in the next segment of our program, where we'll be having as our very special guest here this afternoon for the second time on this platform, Brother Paul Barron. He gave a very good impression of himself the first time around, and we saw that based on your comments, your feedback, asking us to bring back Paul Barron to the program so that he can continue on where he left off. So as always, your wishes are a command right here on Civic Vibes. So that is what we did here this afternoon. So please sit back. You can take a little, breather now, as it were. We are now going into the second segment of the program. So if you need to take a break, whatever it is, now is the time to do that, and be right back with us in like 3 to 4 minutes time when we engage our brother Paul Barron for the second leg of the Civic Vibes program. All right, we'll be back in just a bit. Whilst we wait though, let's do this one from Itana. Itana calls this one Roots, talking about the young people. And that is where our conversation is going to center around this afternoon, all around young people. Itana, where are you, my friend?
So you beat them, so you mistreat them, so you lock them down, and you think that you've won, but them a whole a meditation. Out in a iration. Them a follow Rastafari, and I live upright. So tell me where you are gonna do now. Tell me what you gonna do now. Tell me what you gonna do now. That the youth are all them roots. You can't want a dog and I lose. You can't hide the truth from the youth. You can't steal the fruit, not the root. That the youth are all them roots.
Dominica, you can steal the fruit and not the root. Itana in song. I have a conversation about the young people in just a while.
Turn them cool. You poison their foods, and you think that you've won, but them a whole a meditation.
Hello there, a special good afternoon.
Them a follow Rastafari, and I live right.
Saying yes.
Tell me what you gonna do now. Tell me what you gonna do now.
You know the purpose of a root 23.
You can't want a dog and I lose. You can't hide the truth from the youth. You can't steal the fruit, not the root. As the youth, I will them rule. Come with your negative spirit. What do you say now? Come around with your white lies, trying to blind everyone's eyes, but them a whole a meditation. Rastafari, and I live.
Just giving you a little number here from Itana entitled The Root.
Tell me what you gonna do now. Tell me what you gonna do now. That the youth are all them roots. You can't want a dog and I lose.
Right, let me say now, let me move across to my guest here. Brother Paul Barron, are you there with us? Good afternoon to you, sir. Brother Barron, good afternoon. Can you come in?
Hi, good afternoon, officer. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, pretty
You know, I can't hear you. Yeah. There you go. I still can't hear you, brother.
Are you hearing me?
I'm sorry, I don't know. It's some technical difficulty. I'm unable to hear you.
All right, let me see if I can rectify that, Paul, and I'll come
Yeah,
back to you.
loud. There you go.
You're hearing me?
Yes, sir.
All right, I
You
guess
know, I had to read your lips, man. I see calling my name. I was wondering if it's on my end.
what you're hearing me loud and clear
I
now.
can hear you clearly now, brother.
All right.
Good
Basically,
afternoon.
yes, good afternoon to you. Basically, what happened that the fader got stuck, and so it was
I see.
it was in that in between phase between volume and off.
All right, fair enough, man. However, I got a little glimpse of your previous guest, but I can well imagine he had a very fruitful discussion with you.
Yes, indeed, it was.
Notably, some of these things plague our Dominican society in respect to police brutality and the inappropriateness in arrest at times. So that was fitting.
Yes, indeed, it was fitting indeed. Brother Baron, again, you know, you had a
You'll have to
very
excuse me. Just excuse me. I have a young toddler running around. My daughter is here. Just a minute. See?
well. She wants to be part of the program, Paul.
You want to be part of the program. Just give me 1 minute.
No
See
problem.
you soon, sweetheart.
No problem. Paul,
Bye.
I was saying yes. Paul, I was saying a while ago, you had a very, you know, excellent first round, as it were, right here on the platform, based on the comments that, you know, were generated there. Persons were asking for Paul a second time around. And so we listened, and you are there. Again, I want to say a special good afternoon to you. And in terms of your response to these persons who wanted you back, what do you want to say to them in response?
Well, I must say the comments coming out of the last program was very encouraging. And it just goes to say that there's a great need for the conversations that we have. Everything really starts with an idea. And it is on the basis of those ideas and sharing them, we hope to, in turn, have an impact on the lives of Dominicans, both locally and in the diaspora. But it was very encouraging. And I want to say how grateful I am for the listenership and the audience and the level of engagement also, because I took some time to go back for the comments and I saw some of what questions were pointing out and seeking clarification, and in most cases emphasizing some of the points that was made. So guys, I am here to serve. I have been in service to Dominica all my life, and the support that you're giving is encouraging me to do so further. So thank you very much.
Yes, Paul. For the persons who did not get a chance to listen or even view that conversation, can you just briefly recap what we discussed back then before we get into the meat of today's topic?
Sure. What we sought to do in the previous program was to look at the question of youth unemployment and how it relates to young persons in Dominica and how it has had such a crippling effect on our economy. We sought to highlight that the youth strata, meaning persons between the ages of 15 to 35, is extremely disenfranchised, and in most cases, there's a huge disconnect between that strata and the ability to be gainfully employed within the economy. We also took the opportunity to look at overall youth issues or issues that confront young persons, and how it is that we can bring this to the forefront by raising our voices to begin with and letting the policy makers know that we are of great concern about our future.
Yes, indeed. And that went down very, very well, as we said before. But this afternoon, Brother Baron, we're going to talk about youth entrepreneurship and their ability to access finance, as it were. I know that is a very, very broad topic, very interesting topic for some persons. How would you want to break it down, and where would you want to start?
Well, we want to look at access to finance on the basis of the creation of financial instruments or programs that are geared towards young persons. And secondly, the inability for them to be able to access those funds. Because the provisions of fund is one thing, but access to it is in most cases where the challenge lies. And we're also going to look at it vis-a-vis the financial services industry to include banking and how some of the underwriting requirements can sometimes be disabling as it regards young persons. And we know commonly that young persons sort to seek finance from either public or private funds through the banking system, but turn up empty. And that is where the challenge is. And it's because of that, we want to look at it. So I'll take the opportunity through my own experience, having been a director or trustee, as it was known, at the Dominica Youth Business Trust. And because of that, I can give you an idea of how how funding is made available to young persons through that effort and how it is and can be accessed, and also to look at how a vast majority of entrepreneurs are unable to access funds, while at the same time the provisions are being made there. We are also going to take an opportunity for obvious sake to look at how tribal also how tribal it can be in most cases, or near barbaric, where it regards young persons being eliminated altogether from the financial system, whether through public or private. So.
Yes, indeed. And thank you very much for laying down the foundation where we're going to pitch our conversation from this afternoon.
Right.
The good book says that I read, it says, money answereth all things. And I would want to ask you that this afternoon, Paul, how important is, you said, access to money, and not just money itself, how important it is to young persons out there in terms of accessing certain funds to get their small business, to get the micro business, to get whatever business they want to get up the ground going? How important is the monetary factor?
Well, it's very crucial, because the ability to get funding is more or less and will create or provide what you consider the lifeblood of your company. And in most cases, entrepreneurs do not operate within the realms of what you consider the corporate structure, business environment. It is on the basis that you have an idea, you recognize that your idea can address a particular need, and because of that, you want to position it in the marketplace. Starting a business is no easy feat. Renownedly, Elon Musk said it's like eating glass and staring into the abyss, because it really requires above normal levels of even a sort of physical or emotional self in order to withstand the economic pressures of the day. And because of that, the foremost tenant that has to, or the foremost condition that has to exist, is that there must be some form of funding that is available to young entrepreneurs to take them off the ground after they have sort of rationalized, conceptualized, and at the point of implementing their businesses. And this is really where we see the challenges. Now, if you look at the connection that we've made between last program and this program, unemployment, we recognize, is an issue for all of us. Youth entrepreneurship, or entrepreneurship altogether, is what is a proposed solution to our unemployment crisis. Now, through youth entrepreneurship, the possibility exists then to create employment for others, but not also that. There's a possibility to make certain linkages between various industries, be it service, manufacturing, or the likes, which will in turn sort of serve as a catalyst. So the more persons you can have, or more young entrepreneurs you can have entering the business environment, it will then in that case sort of alleviate some of the tension or pressures that we have with respect to unemployment. I rightly identified that the public and the private sector is unable to absorb all of the talent that we have available in Dominica. And it is on that basis that there's this call, a resounding call to focus our efforts on youth entrepreneurship. And there are many already successful young entrepreneurs in Dominica. but yet there are still many more who want to enter the business cycle, and because of that, sometimes are almost instantaneously challenged by not having or the provisions of funds not being made available to them. It is sort of what you consider a sifting mechanism on the basis that if you are a young person and you have a specific business idea and you within your own self know that this idea can succeed, but not being able to get the funds. And in some cases, as I know, as a young leader and politician, even not wearing the right party collar could allow for you to not be considered. And that is where I mentioned earlier the whole idea of the whole barbaric system. Now, when you consider the financial system and the way it is make up and its sort of mechanism where it regards the underwriting requirements, almost instantaneously eliminates a large portion of these young entrepreneurs. For example, in most cases, you need to have a certificate of title, co-guarantor. In some cases, you need a specific amount of fund, 20% deposit in order for you to access those monies. So we have to think very carefully how we position or the types of funding that we make available to young persons so that they can access them. It is all well to say that there's several millions of dollars at the aid bank, but by those monies sitting in the vaults of these various banks, it would mean that they and not in the hands of the entrepreneurs, it means that it will be defeating the purpose of the fund to begin with. I hope you can understand and appreciate that which I've said.
Yes, I appreciate that very much. And just to add to what you said in terms of the monies being at the vaults in the various banks, it is even one thing for these monies to be in the vault, but it is another thing for these monies not to be in the vault, but they are said to be in the vault. You understand where I'm getting at now. So
I'm with you. But the problem of access to funds is something that plagues economies or small island developing states such as Dominica. We have to understand that most people tend to see Dominica as it is on the surface. But if you peer beneath our systems, financial systems, public systems, you'll recognize that these systems are still very underdeveloped. And access to financing is one such area that is standing out. And we have heard the public pronouncements. We have known that monies in most cases are made available and placed at the aid bank. But the moment you go there, you can, if you wish, you can conduct a survey among the entrepreneurs. They will tell you the moment they sit in that chair and have a conversation with the underwriting officer, who is in that case the loan officer, all hope is lost, by not being able to come up with the specific requirements. It almost seeks to sort of alienate these individuals, and the level of frustration that can creep in at that time might all mean that you walk away from your idea altogether. So it really does call for a great degree of strength from our young entrepreneurs to want to go further. There are cases where, and I know I've looked at some cases in the region and different parts of the world, where the sort of underwriting requirements can be sort of relaxed to an extent, so that it can allow for those young persons to access it. You cannot look at an individual on the basis that you look at every other customer. There must be some level of, I don't want to say favoritism, but there must be some level of due consideration on the part of young people. And there are many stories out there, Loftus, about young entrepreneurs who have gone to Aid Bank, gone to NBFD, gone to National Bank, the credit unions, and almost instantaneously their idea dies there. So it is all well to say that these monies are available, but access to those monies, and that is what this program seeks to achieve. That is what we're seeking to achieve today through your platform.
Yeah, you spoke of some of the frustrations that some young persons go through when trying to access some of these funds. I know you are well connected with a number of young persons out there. Can you go into a little more detail and extrapolate as to some of these frustrations that these young persons come to you and say, Brother Baron, I went there, I did that, I tried that, but that is a reality. Can you?
Well, I've heard these stories. I've heard these stories during my tenure at the Dominica Youth Business Trust and also the National Youth Council of Dominica, and an opportunity to speak with young persons across the country, I have heard the level of frustrations and the comments that normally come out of this from these young entrepreneurs when interacting with the financial systems, be it public, that which is provided by the public or the private sector. But in most cases, the word that glares the most or pops out is that they really just given up. And some of the comments would be like, they don't care about us, you know, and they do not wish to help. You know, why put money in the bank and I'm unable to access it? Or some comments like, my business idea can go no further. And in most cases, you hear them saying, it's like I've wasted my time, you know. And what happens in that case is those young entrepreneurs leave our shores and go into Antigua, go into St. Lucia, go into St. Kitts, and they are always almost instantaneously treated with open arms, and then shoot right to the top. I can make mention of my dear friend, Mr. Nano, I think Greenaway, who is an active social media personality. Yes. And Nano was here in Dominica struggling all the time, trying to get help, having so much brilliant ideas. And when he got to St. Kitts, almost instantaneously, was able to succeed, even by the same time holding down a part-time job as well. You know, so and I think he has already made the shift into full-time entrepreneurship. But these countries recognize that business ideas, the talents that young persons have, is that which is needed to drive their economies. And because of that, they make the conditions for accessing monies less stringent than in the Dominica experience. When I was a young man, I had the opportunity to interact with a younger man, rather. I saw that. You know, when I was a younger man, I had the opportunity, because I'm a financial advisor by profession. So okay. I trade in insurances, that aspect of financial services. And in most cases, I used to always speak with the loan officers and the various bankers here in Dominica. And you would be surprised the reason why our financial system is so rigid, or rather the underwriting requirements are so rigid. It is on the basis that men and women used to come to Dominica, Dominicans themselves included, dress up in nice suits and present ideas and walk away with several hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars on failed business ideas and business attempts. But my question or concern at that time is, why do we have to pay for that? A young man or a young woman from La Plaine or Grand Fort, you understand me? So yes. We cannot, if you ask me, Loftus, I've taken a very good look at some of what is necessitated for the financial services industry. And it almost requires an overhaul. It needs to be at a more favorable level in order to be conducive for business activities in Dominica. And the banks and the credit unions have to lower. I can understand that they want to protect their interests and their levels of profitability, but the banks also have a responsibility there to serve as a catalyst within an economy. You cannot just be acting as a saving, a deposit and withdrawal system. Because if that is the case, we might as well put our monies in a pillowcase. You understand me? A bank has the responsibility to serve as a catalyst, as an engine for growth within an economy, and that cannot be said with any great level of high marks in the Dominica situation. I mean, Loftus, if you look at your own experience, I'm almost sure you'll be able to recollect some challenges. I remember once I was calling a financial institution asking for very small, because I have a small business as well. I'm an entrepreneur. I actively trade in insurance and real estate, and also digital marketing and communications. And I think at that time, my wife and I, we were just beta in the system. We did not necessarily want to access the funds at that time, but you know, it just occurred to me, I wonder what they would ask for. So I called the credit union. I think the amount of money we were seeking then was, I think, $5,000. And
$5,000.
$5,000. It
Wow.
was a beta. We were just wanting to know how the financial systems are. And Bossman, you had to go and look for your grandmother deed. And I told myself, if that kind of thing,
I know.
do you know that it has been proven that the manner in which you treat a client at a financial institution, when I say manner, the level of customer service and professionalism is closely linked to the ability to repay the loans? If you go to a financial institution and you're treated in such a professional manner with great customer service and the access that will be created, do you know that that individual has a greater likelihood to repay the monies than someone who goes through the normal process of underwriting? You know, so we have to look at our own country-specific needs in Dominica. We have to look at our own individual, group, and organizational needs where monies or the need for monies are concerned, or the need to access monies, and use that as a metric in order to help catalyze business in the Dominican economy. Because, you know, the pandemic has stressed or has placed our public finances at a very, very threatening level. You know, monies are not available as it used to be. In respect to the financial systems, you find people are more holding on to or saving in that case because all banks are very liquid. Dominica's banks are some of the most liquid banks in the entire region. And by that, it means there's a lot of storehold of monies. But those monies lying within the financial system, in the vaults, is not serving anyone's any purpose. You understand? It's not helping anyone. So, for example, you have the rich minority having a lot of monies piled up. If you have people within the working or the middle class or entrepreneurs coming from these two stratas wanting to access those funds, but they don't have that level of access. You know, so we have to look at it from a very holistic sort of comprehensive sort of angle. If we want to save, because I know people like you, Loftus, and your listenership want to save this beautiful country of ours. They want to save Dominica from the impeding financial crisis, political crisis, social crisis that is really just knocking on our doors. But in order for us to do that, we have to make very prudent, very strategic decisions going forward.
True. So I'm hearing you talking, Paul, and I'm taking in what you're saying. Question to you: do you think that, for example, from a credit union standpoint, a bank's standpoint, that there's a certain level of risk, as it were, that a financial institution must be prepared to undertake, especially when dealing with young persons or younger persons in business, as it were, with their small businesses? You think that there's a level of risk that these institutions must be prepared to take in order to help the country's economy?
Well, there is a certain level of risk that any financial institution must sort of perceive and be willing to absorb or to take, rather, when loaning monies to any individual for any specific reasons. What we're suggesting is that the financial institutions, you have to guard your risk, and we get that.
Yes.
But you cannot do that at the expense of stifling growth in an economy. You understand? You cannot sort of raise your walls in a sort of self-serving manner and at the same time stifling growth or potential growth in an economy. Now, the potential growth that exists is where young persons, whether having gone and trained themselves or whether having worked within an industry for a while and recognize the need for launching and starting a business. The free market economy, which Dominica supposedly is supposed to have, must always have a sort of relationship between demand and supply. So once the banks understand, and I know that the banks do, I don't think the banks do not understand the need to sort of serve as a catalyst for growth and potential growth. The challenge thereof is the underwriting, the stringent underwriting requirements. For example, recently, most parts of the world, different countries, you hear of green projects or go green or green economy, green jobs.
Yes.
When you hear the question of green economy, green jobs, there are certain financial instruments that are being made available for that specific purpose. Okay, have you ever heard in Dominica a specific financial instrument that was geared for music or arts or the likes? I know in some cases you may have heard of loans. I know in case of Margaret Credit Union for farmers or entrepreneur, young farmers, of people in farmers. But the banks and the credit unions and also the policymakers have to craft these programs to suit a specific industry. So you can look at it on a case-by-case basis. But I do understand and appreciate the need to want to guard the interests of the financial institution. But if you have your walls up for all the time, my friend, you will stifle growth in the economy. And it doesn't take long to look around the Dominican economy and see that we are basically in shambles. We're in shambles. You know, it's like a crumbling, it's a crumbling block. Now, in most cases, Dominicans would rely on the government or in that case, the government to sort of inject funds into the economy to resuscitate it. But as you and I know, those monies are no longer available as they used to. So the question is, who is going to save the day? Who is going to save the economy? Now, I've heard that IMF, World Bank, but IMF to a greater extent is sort of being very, how you say it, very careful in serving as a bank, a financial institution or lender of last resort. So even the traditional lenders that we know could come to our rescue and no longer come into that to our rescue in a manner or in the speed that we require them to. World Bank, Caribbean Development Bank, IMF. I mean, the pandemic and the crises that sort of unraveled recently and shocked the world. Dominica wasn't the only place that was affected. But I do know, because the liquidity of our banks, and as I said, is very liquid, may just be the solution that we require. So the banks and the credit unions have to now consider how they can craft certain financial instruments targeted at various industries where young persons want to who want to start off businesses or already are involved in businesses and again considering ways to grow. You understand? We have to look at those things.
Paul, let me give you, Paul, a vivid, lively example of exactly what you're saying. And you're so right. You're on point in that when you talk about there's need to have some sort of crafting of the financial situations in order for entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs at that in particular, to sort of get their business or businesses off the ground. I can tell you, Paul, I'm a man on the ground, and I spoke to an underwriter. You call that person? I call this person loans officer.
Underwriter, loan officer, but the underwriter, I suppose.
Right. I spoke to one or two loans officers at a particular financial institution in Dominica. And you spoke of the music and the arts, and that is where I want to drive home the point that I'm going to make to you. There was these monies that were placed in the vault at that financial institution. Mm-hmm. And a number of musicians and persons in that sector came to me and said, Lofty, we went there, but these things are so stringent. It's like they're asking for our grandmother's deed and whatever it is. Only to find out, Baron, when I did my background in terms of having that one-on-one article discussion with certain of these officers, they told me, Lofty, don't call my name, but let me tell you as it is. As it is, there's the monies there, yes, but at the end of the day, the crafting mechanism that you spoke of, that is not there.
It's not there.
And so when Paul come to me Joe come to me, we can only take his information, take the information.
Precisely.
But now there's not that crafting mechanism. So we cannot even start to deliberate or even reach to the point of disbursing any amount to Brother Baron or whoever is in the arts because there's no crafting instrument. And so that just made the work at that financial institution much, much more tedious.
And that is the truth, Loftus. That is the truth. That is why I skillfully chose this topic about access to finance. Because the moment I've known it, I've heard monies being made at the aid bank, driving down to Roseau and seen a flock and drove of people outside aid bank with the anticipation that they can get the monies. But the moment they step through those doors, they have to make a 360 and leave. Because these pronouncements, and you have to understand, when these pronouncements are made, they are made to serve a particular interest. And I don't like the fact that the government plays with the lives of Dominicans. You understand me? We cannot come on a platform, you know that our situation for employment is dire in the country. Come on a platform, be it radio, internet, or otherwise, and make this pronouncement and help and make people build hope within themselves. And when they go down to Roseau, they're turned up, turning in mud. You understand me? And politicians need to understand that. People's livelihoods are attached to the decisions that are being made. A man and a young woman who is in a relationship, having children and saying, you know, honey, we have a very good idea for us to make money in a particular industry. How can we move forward? We have to understand that at the end of the day, families, children, grandparents, aunties, uncles, all these livelihoods matter when decisions are being made. So I know for a fact that when these monies are placed at the financial institution in question, it is merely a political gimmick.
Wow.
It really is.
Let's zero in, Baron, on an institution, for example, like the NDFD. Prime purpose, prime objective of that, you know, when that organization was conceptualized, was to do exactly what we're discussing this afternoon, to help young persons in particular get off the ground with the business of businesses. I have been to the NDFD. I myself, I am a young entrepreneur and I have had dealings with the NDFD. I am not saying that their askings or their requirements they are as stringent as the banks. I'm not saying that. But even at an institution like that, that's supposed to be, quote unquote, for the benefit thereof of the young people, the younger people, the persons who are green, as it were, where business is concerned. They don't have a title. Their grandmother didn't leave them some cash when she died. They don't have equity. So an institution like NDFD, where would you want to rank NDFD? What would you want to say to them as an institution in terms of the help that they need to step up to provide for some young persons?
Well, it would be interesting to know how NDFD seeks to generate its fund, because it's a foundation.
Yes.
So funding for NDFD must be from external sources. It's neither a bank nor a credit union. Although the underwriting requirements are closely mirrored to the normal financial institutions that exist. But it will be interesting to know how NDFD seeks to raise specific funds. If I understand, when NDFD was created, the need then was to seek funds from various external organizations or donor or friendly donor agencies who are willing to support Dominicans at that level, business or community or the otherwise. But it appears to me that at NDFD, the issue here is an issue of funding and the availability of funding. I do not know to what extent the government uses NDFD, if not to any significant level, but it might be an organization whereby monies can be channeled and then on lend to young persons. But again, if we have that discussion in the manner that I'm relating to you, we may very well end up in the same trap, which is the question of the mechanism and the level of access. being involved in the political system and process and the business environment for a while, you would well imagine that the level of, how do you say it? I can walk the walk and talk the talk. So I do understand what they seek to do. But if we follow that same path, we will end up at the same destination, and that destination will be the inaccessibility of those funds. So these organizations really need to consider the mechanism and how they craft those financial instruments so that it can be opened up to young entrepreneurs. But Loftus, if you'd allow me, I wanted to shift focus to an extent to look at the funding from, because we have looked at the private sector for quite a while. If you'd allow me, I would like to now look at the question of fundings that are made available through the public channels.
All right, but just before we go there, Paul, there's a suggestion that is coming on the feed, and that suggestion is saying, and we can just touch on that, and then you can digress into the public forum. That is saying that when dealing or when trying to access funds of that nature, it's who you know.
Well, that
who knows
is a silver lining in a cloud, and that is true. That is very true. That is very true to suggest, because it really just borderlines on the whole, as I was indicating, to making that shift to the public arena. It really is who you know. There's a great degree of biasness, a great degree of what you call stereotyping at those financial institutions at times. There was a time when your last name was sufficient enough for you to get a loan at the banks and credit unions in Dominica. I don't think it is the case today, but in most cases, yeah, it is based on who you know and how connected you are. But that does not help every young person out there. So they're very right to suggest that.
True.
Very right.
All right. Yes, so you have the floor now in terms of the other aspect you wanted to dive into now.
To look at the question of the public arena and where funding is made available, we know notably that the small business department or unit seeks to address that need. And we also know the question of the Dominica Youth Business Trust. For many persons who do not know what the Dominica Youth Business Trust, because I suppose your program is one of educational. The Dominica Youth Business Trust is an arrangement that was made whereby government seeks to serve as through the business trust as a sort of co-guarantor to individuals seeking funding. The way in which you access the funds is you have to participate in a program or what you call a training with the view of understanding the nature of your business, looking at some of the sort of advantages or disadvantages thereof, or the viability of your company or your business. And once successful at the end of the training, you will be co-guaranteed up to $20,000. So it means, therefore, that you can only seek funding within a particular limit. And while I was at the trust, I found that to be the way the trust is set up is one which can assist a number of young persons. It can, young entrepreneurs. The challenge that exists at the trust boils to the question of the funding that is made available and the limit at which those fundings are placed. For example, to start any successful business and get it up and running will take more than $20,000. So what the government is saying to the young entrepreneurs is that we value your idea, but we are only going to guarantee you up to a certain limit. Okay? And it is on that basis, so it is sort of restricting them. It's placing them in a box. So for example, if you have an idea which would require more, and you know feasibly that your business can generate a lot more monies, you are restricted to a certain limit or a certain amount of money. And I always saw that as being a challenge, because if you're serious about young persons and if you're serious about helping young entrepreneurs, that has to be reconsidered. It has to be reconsidered on the basis that by placing this limit, you're excluding a vast majority of individuals. Now, on the question of exclusion, not many Dominicans know about the business trust. Because what we have found is that, and I would know particularly, is that you have to be part of a particular, you have to be affiliated to benefit from those programs. You have to be part of a cohort of individuals who are sensitive to the policies or what you consider as being pro-government.
And you have to understand. And you say that from a position of
well, I sat on the board, I would know. Okay. And when I make those statements, I have no reservations. Dominicans know me very well to speak my mind. Mm-hmm. And I cannot be a righteous individual and a liberator, someone who speaks on the rights of young people and Dominicans collectively and sugarcoat anything on this platform. So the whole question of you have to be pro-government in order for you to get help. I mean, how beneficial is that to Dominican young entrepreneurs? If you go a step further and you look at the small business unit, the same exists. I served for more than 20 years at the Salibe constituency, and when the question of small business came up, you'd see the PAL rep come up with this list here. You understand? And he would go through it. And if you're not pro-government, you can very well find yourself nowhere to be helped. And I used to consider in this Salibe constituency, I looked at some persons and I used to see them, doing well. And I wondered to myself, why aren't these people being helped? Mm-hmm. Why? And mark you, those persons are on the tarpaulin and serving the people in the Kalinago territory with food and beverages and refreshments for more than 10 years. But yet they didn't receive a dime from the small business unit. So when I took a closer look at that and I saw how barbaric that system was, I could no longer find any great reason to sort of, uphold the principles and of the small business unit. And I know everybody within the unit. I've sat with all the players and all the policy makers within that unit. And the unit does not seek to help a vast majority of youth entrepreneurs unless you're a laborer. And you see, that is the challenge. That is why I made the point that politicians cannot play games with the lives of young people who are intended on helping their families and helping develop their communities and their countries. On occasions, before you chime in, when the small business was created and there was real monies, I would love to see on public account how much monies that were made available to the small business unit. But I can tell you, when the unit opened, from the horse's mouth and seeing it with my plain eyes, you could walk into that unit and walk out with $13,000, $15,000, run down the road, buy cuts and buy a fridge and a stove.
True.
So we have to rethink the way in which the public finances are managed, Loftus. The question is not having money. The question is making monies accessible to the persons who require the money to suit a particular need. And in this case, the need is youth entrepreneurship. Access to finances to sustain, catalyze, and to grow businesses.
True.
You understand? Yeah.
Yes, Jaira Hector is saying here, basically confirming what is being said here this afternoon. He's saying on the live feed here that even he applied to the small business unit at the financial center. And he's saying that financial institution, that small business unit, he's saying is also a political gimmick in his estimation. The requirements and they just shoved them into the dump files. He said he personally made 4 invoices and I never got an assistant. I had to give up and become self-reliant. That is basically a testimony from director.
That is what a lot of people now. You have to understand that the policymakers, in most cases, what we've seen in Dominica and what every Dominican have experienced is that the policymaker, who in that case are the various ministers and parliamentary representatives, in that case serving in parliament, serving in the cabinet of Dominica, in all cases dictate the policies of the various ministries. I was on a program recently, Loftus, and someone asked, the host asked, what was the way forward for Dominica? And I said, the way forward for Dominica is that the public service or the government or the business of the government has to be returned to the public service. Because as long as you have men and women dictating to the various department heads, dictating to the various permanent secretaries that which should be done and which is not right, then we will continue to have a challenge. And so many young persons have not felt the love of the small business unit. Now, the makeup of the unit, the structure of the unit is a viable one. You have your officers who seek to meet with young persons and assess their businesses based on need. You have the director who oversees the unit, and you have persons working within there to ensure that the administrative aspect of the units are done in an efficient and effective manner. Now, it is well because it is an agent and a creature within the public service. But if you have policymakers micromanaging these units and saying, well, Loftus, no, boy, you can't give Loftus talking on the Civic Vibes giving us blows. You can't give Paul Barron, boy, Paul Barron stands in defense of the public. Then we will continue to have a challenge. In every government should seek to level the playing ground. You know, in Barbados, that's why I'm a huge fan of Mia, on the basis that not just Mia, but the philosophy in Barbados is if somebody does well in the country, the government gets the credit. So what the government seeks to do is help everyone. So at the end of the day, Barbados is hailed as being good and important in the eyes of the region. But you can, I mean, come on, my friend. You go out for the Caribbean here, do you hear anybody talking anything significantly good about Dominica, Boston?
That's an all-important question, Paul. That's an all-important question you asked in terms of what is good is being said out there of Dominica. Someone else is chiming in here on the feed. That is where we want to engage our listeners and viewers now. David Joseph is saying, this is a sad state of affairs in Dominica. Partisan politics is destroying our country, yet we seem too blind to see it. All right, Paul, just keep that thought. You'll respond on that in a while. Margel Durand is saying, after Maria, I personally submitted 3 estimates to 3 different people, and Jacques Jordi, not a word. Margel is also continuing here. He says, the same thing happened with building materials and food, water, etc. True facts.
Very
Paul,
much so.
Margel is saying.
So. You see, sometimes I hear these politicians speaking about the United Nations Development Goals and that which need to be achieved in 2030. I hear them talking about the Human Index and topics of humanity and United Nations, various institutions which serve specific rights, indigenous people, children, elderly, women, men. But if you cannot truly feel the impact of policymakers, governments, politicians, if you cannot truly feel a sense that we are doing well on the ground and people's livelihoods there are at risk, then we cannot say that these things that we ratify and these conventions are being upheld in Dominica. And the point I'm crystallizing here is, as this young man suggests, I trust it's a young man wanting building materials and wanting to build a house to provide for your family, to give your family shelter, your granny, your mother, your uncle, is a human and humanity-based need.
True, true.
The government of Dominica cannot say that they have had any significant or alleviated significantly the plight of Dominicans or the vast majority of the Dominicans. I will always maintain that the vast housing revolution was only meant to house a support base of the Dominican Labour Party. But what of the men and women throughout the country who today do live in deplorable states, whose children still go barefoot, who are at times hungry? You understand? So to deny somebody building materials on the basis of their affiliation is outrightly barbaric. Now, the gentleman asked the question of how seemingly Dominicans are blind. Well, I want to give Dominicans some credit today because I often say I consume the internet and I listen to a lot of different voices and different channels and different platforms. And I can tell you, a vast majority of Dominicans are beginning to understand exactly where they are. And they have accepted that they themselves have contributed to that, meaning that they created a monster. I included participated, if you want to consider it. Some blame can be given to Paul Byron on the basis that he used what somebody told me, his light to shine in this darkness, this dark world for Ohio with respect to the Dominican Labour Party. But Dominicans recognize that they made and continue to make a mistake. They also recognize that all these flattery words cannot put food and money in their pocket anymore.
True.
So I can tell you safely, the Dominican Labour Party will have a rude awakening, and they may try to postpone the general election as much as they can on the hope of wanting to garner more support. But there's some huge surprises in store for the Dominican Labour Party.
Well, let's hope that you're right, Brother Byron, in that department.
Well, I know that I'm right, you know, because my timing was very strategic. you have to understand, Loftus. I mean, just I consider you as a student of politics. You have to understand the laws of physics, my friend.
Yes.
You will incline. No, there's a law in economics that says the law of diminishing return, which means with each additional product that is created, it diminishes thereof because of the resources. Sure. Now, we have had 5 election cycles, right? Or was it 4? With each additional or each election cycle that is made or that is called and run, there is a diminishing effect. So you're telling me the 1 and the 3 votes that was being won or allowing a party to win in a constituency, you're telling me it don't have 3 persons that turn against Labour in Castle Bruce and Lapland as yet, Loftus?
Well, let me tell you, you are now opening up a different kind of worms, and I think that kind of worms for sure.
Let us keep on topic.
We have to come back to that topic in particular to go a bit deeper, to kind of crunch the numbers, as it were, to see exactly what you're saying there. So yes. But you are making some valid points for sure.
Truly. You know, the question, as just to reemphasize, with respect to the small business unit, I have no qualms with the players within the unit on the basis that they're doing their jobs. My issues here is with the sort of micromanaging and breathing down people's neck to indicate who should get help and who should not get help. Because the monies of the public, by all means, belong to the public. And there are some young persons out there with some very brilliant ideas, Loftus. I mean, it breaks my heart There's some young Dominicans out there that are extremely talented. Persons who want to run their business, hire 2-3 persons, and in that case have certain linkages with different industries, and you turn up on the doors of the small business unit, you turn up on the doors of the aid bank, and then you are left wanting. You know, so we cannot continue to support that. And we certainly cannot continue to act as if it is not a problem. You know, it really is.
True. Paul, let just before I go back to some more live comments here so that you can comment on, we acknowledge the time is already 6 o'clock, but the discussion is quite engaging, and I know Paul will grant us another half an hour of his time. Is that so, Paul?
Let's hope my daughter will. She keeps coming out looking for me.
Okay, well, once she takes you away, then we'll have to agree to that.
Yeah, I will use her. She will be my timekeeper.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
But I was going to give you a personal testimony of mine, Paul, that can, kind of lend itself to the conversation that we're having here. I'm an entrepreneur for some time now. I've been employing certain persons, engaging certain persons on the ground, especially young persons. I'm a qualified electrician, qualified technician. And Paul, what you have been saying, it has just been resonating with me so much in that I can feel exactly what you're saying. Left for the powers that be, or left to the powers that be rather, in terms of helping Loftus Dura business move forward, or put me at a different level, then that's like null and void. In that a number of times arose in Dominica whereby the people from the DYBT, the people from the small business unit supposed to be on the ground, out there, seeking out these businesses who are, for example, in existence already like mine, and finding out from them what are the challenges, how can we help, what can we do to, help push, help grow that business of yours. But I must say, I have not seen anybody, I have not heard anybody. Now, the mere fact I have not seen or heard anybody, Paul, I know where I stand in this country with my big mouth, as it were. And I know I will not belittle myself to go to anybody that have to ask me as to who I vote the last election. No. So on that premise, I choose to do what I have to do, go through the trials, go through the pain, but keep my business at a standard so that my customers will be, quote unquote, satisfied. And thereby is word of mouth, advertisement and what through media, whatever it is, that helps me get along. So I can now see with a number of different persons, especially young persons who are in that predicament and doesn't possess that fortitude of character like myself and would want to genuflect, as it were, or bow or bend or whatever it is to some persons in authority to get their way or get by. And I hope that the discussion we're having here, even though young persons are not there with us in the numbers this afternoon, but they will see it fit to look at the live, listen to the live, so that they can be inspired, they can be motivated, they can be empowered to basically do what I put myself in that bracket now, we have to do to lift ourselves from that slumber. So I just wanted to rest with you, rest with the listening audience, that personal testimony, as it were, that you cannot get better than that.
Yeah, no, you're very right. But the situation is that this witch hunt here about running down people on the basis of who they vote for, this thing has to stop in Dominica, man.
True.
The Dominica Labour Party has destroyed every sense of community that we've had. They have destroyed our democracy and patriotism to the extent of Dominicans almost don't wanting to be identified as Dominicans again. And this idea of running down young people, running down the citizens of the country on the basis that who you vote for, that's foolishness. It was so saddening to hear of recent the leadership acknowledging that a gentleman had not voted for him, but yet he's there at a regional conference. Nobody wants to know these things. In fact, if you consider an electoral process and an electoral system, nobody is supposed to know who voted for who. But the Labour Party has been so skillful in its effort to understand and want to know who voted for the Labour Party and the United Workers' Party. This thing, that's a huge joke, man. We're all Dominicans. And because of that, we all want to be treated fairly. And young people here are crying out and saying, but when will my voice be heard? When will my business get some support? Well, when will I see? And the idea that the Pal Rep is chief custodian of thousands of people within his constituency to determine the level of benefit they get is just utter barbaric.
True.
You know, it's utter barbaric.
Yeah, and that statement, Paul, was said, sort of in a jokingly manner in Guyana as to, what's his name, Hillary shilling for
Yeah,
the
that's
vote for me.
man.
And things have a way of showing up, because out of the hat the mouth speaketh. And if you can go,
I love that which you have said.
if one can go, Paul, at a regional level meeting and talk about something as minuscule as that from a national standpoint, it says something about the person uttering those statements.
Well, that is a confirmed and empirical evidence of the law of diminishing return. But we'll discuss that on another level, I suppose.
True. Yes. Jan Joseph is watching. She's saying true. I guess she's saying true to the conversation that she's hearing. True talk. Good afternoon to you, Jan Joseph. Patricia Fountain is saying here, the officers that are on the ground, who are supposed to be doing the survey, I think she's speaking to the people in this institution that we spoke of, the DYBT and also the small business unit. They need to put the politics aside and free up the country. Yeah. That is what Patricia Fountain is saying. Peltier, that is what I leave Peltier. I hope I pronounce your name properly, Peltier. That person is saying, this is an interesting conversation. I'm happy to listen to this kind of positive vibes. Truth can unravel people. I am here hoping that our young people, they're listening to the conversation that is being uttered here. That is that person's comment. David Joseph is writing here, they are only doing what is expected of them. When the most senior minister can openly say that the government will give to labor rights first and others will get what is left, that ought to tell you something. We have had 3 comments before I kind of go through the rest. Any thoughts on what you just said?
Well, you know, they're basically echoing the sentiments that I've shared and in collaboration with what you've said as well. We cannot continue to treat people on the basis of their affiliation. I mean, if we understand the challenges that our forefathers have had to even arrive at attaining the right to universal suffrage, which is the ability to vote, and coming out of the experience of slavery and our colonizers taking away every right that we once had and the total freedom that we once had, we will come to understand that the right to vote is a sacred right. And the right to affiliation is a sacred right. It is something that has been bestowed on us by our Constitution through our democracy to enable us to favor, support, affiliate with whoever we wish. And the government of the day must only seek to do its job, which is in that case to help every Dominican. And I always say 72 souls is not a lot of people. So the idea that the government continues to hunt people down on the basis that of what they did, who they voted, what they say in the public sphere, what they say in the community. I mean, that's foolish. It's childish, Loftus. It's childish. And the world is looking at that. When a stimulus package is given in America, they don't look for Democrats and Republicans.
True.
You know, they look at people based on need. And that is the situation that we have to bring to the forefront of Dominica. Every Dominican has to be assessed on need and not political affiliation.
Paul, you know? but just to interject a bit, Paul, you know, there are a number of even young persons, Paul, who, for some strange reason, I must add, they know what they are supporting in terms of the disrespect is not right, but they continue to support that. What is going through the mind of such young people?
You know, I was asked that question recently on the other program that I had about a week ago. And, you know, Dominicans are persons who are extremely, what do you consider? We have big hearts, Loftus. Mm-hmm. We have big hearts on the basis that if you are presented as a candidate who is viable, who seemingly at the time means well and wants to do well, we often show the love. And I suppose in that case, the love that we give is that we support you by way of vote. But your trust or the trust that we place in you can quickly be eroded. And that is really this is where we are in the Dominica political space. The trust that we have placed on our leaders for so long is being eroded on the basis that we are not getting ahead. That is why I mentioned earlier, it is a natural phenomenon that if you are betrayed, if you feel that a promise that was made is broken and there's no real desire on your part to fulfill it, then the almost likely thing to happen is to move away. I mean, you and I have to learn to be patient. But being involved in the public sphere for a while, 20 years, Dominicans, as you say, Labour has groomed an entire adult. It might seem out of space to think that Labour will never go away, but to think that Labour will never go away it's like hocus pocus, man.
Paul, in the next discussion that we must have, it's imperative that we.
I was just responding to the comments on this regarding because
but in the next discussion, Paul,
what we
must have, it is imperative that we go down into Labour having groomed an adult.
Yeah.
What would it take to ungroom that adult, as it were, into getting the necessary change done in order to benefit self and country?
It all boils down to needs, Loftus.
So we will get into that conversation the next time around. Let me see if we can go through some of the comments. Marshall Durant again is saying, good afternoon, Paul. Politics is a funny thing. Jennifer Daru says, talented and skilled indeed. Josephine Williams is right here. Very interested program as always. Dorian Dorival says, but when money comes to play, a lot of people will be fooled by what we see it before. Marshall Duragin is writing, great program, Lofty, as usual. Adi John is listening. Jennifer Dyer is saying, Paul hit the nail in all directions, and not only on the head. You really ponged it in. So you're some kudos from Jennifer Dyer is coming your way. All right, Henrietta James is writing here, I am not on the ground, but I'm watching the feedback. Things are changing. We are learning. They will learn. I guess that is the comment of.
She is right. She's very right.
Yes. Mendora Luis says, that's true. Interesting discussions. Thanks to you all. Let me see if I could get in another comment here. Darren Yard says, Paul, I think you should be on the prime minister levels right now. Lead the young people, bro. Are you ready for it? That's the all important question that brother Yad is asking. Are you ready for that challenge, bro?
Oh, that's to me?
Yes, yes. I'm asking it on your behalf.
My entire life has prepared me for it, Loftus. Every decision that I have made up to the point at which I am has directed, groomed, prepared me for the position in which I'm seeking to attain. So yes, and it is a continued learning process. So I will be a student of politics my entire life, but more importantly, people, and seeking to help address their needs.
Okay, so Brother Yad, you heard your answer from the horse's mouth, as it were. He is prepared, he was groomed for that, and he's ready to go. David Joseph said, let's hope that they're listening, and I would want to think David is referring to the young people. The fact is that they want and expect change, yet is not willing to participate in the process. Okay, Clara Lynn Warrington is writing here as well. Very interesting program. Thanks to Civic Vibes. Lofty Dura, big up. Thank you very much, Warrington, as well. We have some persons basically dominating the conversations here. Let me see if I could inject into the conversation at least a new person here. Gertrude is writing, wicked government. Julie Polidor is saying, this guy speaks very well. I love listening to the information he brings out. Wish more young people would be listening and participate. I can't agree with you more, Ms. Polidor. Thank you very much for your comment.
Thank you.
Let me see. Didi Easter is writing here. Dominica rather, is in a sad state of affairs. To that end, we can't solve the problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. Would you agree with Didi Easter, Paul?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Gertrude again is saying they must go. And I would want to think Gertrude is referring to the government of the day. But Paul, in a nutshell, the sentiments that are coming through based on the writings in the feed, persons are again loving the conversation that you're having, persons are loving the information that you're dispensing. And as you said, it is just a matter of time before something happens. But some persons think, like myself, it is taking a little too long for that to happen.
Well, I can appreciate that, Loftus, because I know there have been some voices in the wilderness for a very long time.
Yep.
And there are many Dominicans who have been seeking change for a long time. But, you know, there's always, it is often said that there's no better timing than God's timing. And we always have to understand that at the end of the day, it's truly the Most High who is in control.
True.
What I can tell you safely, and I think the best way I can put this is I was having a conversation once in the barbershop. And, you know, the barbershops are a university, you know. And a gentleman
and the hair salons as well, huh?
And the hair salons
where people congregate.
That's correct. And you know, the gentleman was asking and saying, stating some of the same concerns that you've shared and others. Why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so? And I told him something. I suppose at the time it seemed a little bit harsh, but I said, brother, Dominicans are not hungry yet. You know, and I say the moment we get hungry, and I don't mean hungry in terms of the need to fill our bellies, but when we recognize that we cannot address and meet and satisfy the demands that are placed on us as boyfriend, as husband, as mother, as daughter, as wife, then we'll have a wake up. And that is likely to happen, and more than likely to happen, especially on this turn of events. So we are at a stage where we're outrightly fed up. We're literally fed up.
Irvin Collier is writing here saying, Paul, the young people needs to hear from you much more.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I've been considering ways in which I can bring out information publicly. I would like to do so in a very informed and educational manner. And through your program, Civic Vibes is one way of doing that. I hope to begin at some point a school tour. I often see great value in being able to reach out to the respective schools and various school systems or bodies and the likes. I was told that it is necessary, and I saw a great need to make representation at the Dominica State College as well. I just hope that I can do so without the, what do you call it? The brunt of the Dominica Labour Party, because Dominicans are aware that in most cases, when you bring truth to light, you know, you're almost instantaneously targeted and persecuted. So I want to do these things in a very meaningful way. I want to do it in a very organized and educational and informative, informational manner, and which does not place me and my family at adverse risk. I've continued to participate in the political process. I have made that quite known and public as well. And I'm just in search of the right opportunities. But more importantly, I'm allowing God to lead and I follow.
True.
Yeah.
True. Well, Paul, what I want to tell you publicly, that is Civic Vibes. It's a quote unquote community-oriented organization. And so, yes, we will be doing some partnering in the communities, and we hope that when we get to your neck of the wood, that is the Kalinago territory and beyond, because Dominica, Paul, is your territory. Here in you speak, Dominica is your territory.
I agree, certainly.
We will be engaging you much more so that the persons on the ground, the young people, the adults, the elderly on the ground, they will be hearing from Paul Byron much more, you know, up and direct, so that that information,
I also welcome that.
Yeah, that information, Paul, and others that you have been dispensing on this platform will be made much more readily available to them, be it in Dailies, La Plaine, Marigot, Maho, Soufriere, Scott's Head, Grand Fond, wherever it is. that that is what Civic Vibes is all about. It's to go on the ground and touch the people lives that matter in very meaningful ways.
Thank you, man. I'm looking forward to the opportunity.
True. Paul, it's 22 minutes past 6 o'clock. We don't want to hold you much longer in fear of your little one come and grab you, and we do see you on screen. So we'll use the next 8 minutes just for you to kind of give your solidifying wrap-up comments.
Sure. And again, it continues to be a pleasure, Loftus, and to the listeners, I must commend you for your continued participating, and especially the support that you've been giving me and Loftus and individuals like ourselves. You know, we envisage a Dominica whereby we can not feel that by exercising our rights and freedoms is a risky business. You know, I want to ensure that through these platforms and some of the other speaking events that we have, that we can understand first that to develop our country requires a collective effort. It requires a collective effort on all our parts. Since we're all Dominicans, we all treasure this island and what it has to offer. You and I know that we are nowhere where we should be. We have been taken for a ride, frankly. It is at the point that it is glaring to the extent that our economy cannot or has not grown to any significant level. The reason why I am emphasizing and overemphasizing that young persons stand or at a greater risk is because we are considered and known to be most vulnerable. And the development of our country, the development of Dominica really hinges on us. Our parents are maturing and growing, our grandparents, sadly, are leaving us for the great beyond. We must now consider how we use our skills, our talent, our treasures, and our time to build this country. Without a doubt, our participation in the political process would mean that we have to give direction to the government and the business of the public. And that is really the call that I continue to make to young people. Understand the role that you have to play. Understand that which you need to do to ensure that you bring about a significant change in the political process, which would enable you to live a much favorable life. If we don't do that, I fear none of us should complain. You know, so I really want to thank you, Loftus, ultimately. Civic Vibes is really, and I must commend you for taking advantage of social media to bring the information out to the public, because I know you have used Q95 radio as a platform, but as you can imagine, the dynamics of communications is changing into a digital era, and what you've done is really a good job. And I want to commend you on that, and I thank you very much. On behalf of myself and my family, I really want to extend best wishes to every Dominican. Fortunately, today is Pentecost Sunday, which is 40 days after the resurrection of Christ. It means, therefore, that there will always be hope, since someone and that person, Christ, died for salvation.
Indeed. Let me just take in some final comments, Paul, Brother Baron, sure, before we end what has been a very interesting discussion here this afternoon. Claralyn Warrington is saying that would be great. As to what is great, I guess some of the initiatives that we laid out before. Joe Benjamin says, keep up the good work, guys. Coro Raffo Sr. is watching as well. Jaira Hector, that young man we had sometime last week on our, not last week, the time back on our program, he's still here with us. And he as well is saying, but it's my pleasure to see some change in this country. I am so inspired by these words he has spoken here this afternoon. Jennifer Darrow says, yes, Paul Baron is on point. Bring him back very, very soon. Roy Francis says, keep it up, my brother. One love. David Joseph writes, always enjoying listening to this young man, as he has not only points out the ills affecting this country, but also offers some solution to the problem. Thank you, Mr. Baron. That is from David Joseph. Marshall Duran writes, we have been left behind by all the OHS countries. We are last Kakarot. Henrietta James, thanks, gentlemen. Blessed weekend. God's blessing. Owen Prospers writing, Paul, to me, you are a savior to my island of Dominica. That is Brother Prospers. Comment to you.
Thank you, man.
Paul. Everlasting Peter says, yes, Paul, we need you to go on several meets and greet young persons tours. You will be very, very successful. Everlasting Peter is saying. Johnny Jacques is saying, thank you, Mr. Baron. David Joseph again is saying, good night to all who enjoyed what is left of your extended weekend to Dominica. As you enjoy the many festivities, please do everything necessary to be safe and stay safe. Final comment, Marshall Durham basically dominated the program here this afternoon with his comment. Thanks, Lofty, for an excellent afternoon. Great program as usual. Gentlemen, gentle ladies on the live, we have to take it here in the interest of time. We have gone past over time by at least half an hour. So I want to again thank Paul for gracing us with that extra half an hour. Paul, your final thoughts, please.
Thank you, brother. Again, I want to wish every Dominican well. Continue to embrace every opportunity to realize that once you are talented, important, and we need you and your services and your continued services to Dominica. I want to wish everybody well this weekend. I know tomorrow is a holiday. The festivities are already ongoing. Please be safe in light of the current COVID pandemic. But more importantly, drink responsibly, and enjoy clean social fun. So continue to do well, and I love every Dominican.
All right, Brother Baron, it's always a pleasure welcoming you here and engaging you on Civic Vibes. Thank you very much, bro. And
thank you, brother. All the best.
Take care of the little one. The family needs you now.
All the best. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All righty.